Let's go for a walk. My next guest is Adam W. Barney. Adam is a growth coach based in Boston, Mass, with over 23 years of experience in leadership and professional development. He specializes in assisting both emerging and established leaders in achieving growth and success. Recognized as one of the top 15 coaches in Boston in 2023, Adam has a proven track record of elevating talent. In addition, he has a new book coming out, Make Your Own Glass Half Full, which offers an insight into harnessing optimism and autonomy for both personal and professional growth. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. Without further ado, let's go for a walk with Adam W. Barney. Adam, what's the raw truth about achieving success that most people don't talk about?
I mean, the majority of it is really just that it's self-led. It comes from within. I don't think a lot of people spend the time, and I'll describe it as sweat equity, to get into themselves and look inward. Most people are either too busy and they don't spend the time to give themselves the space to look inward. And that's the biggest piece of it. It's about understanding what your heart of heart is and using tools for visioning to get there. You know, my favorite top of the heap one that I've used throughout my life is Ikigai, which is the Japanese concept for the reason of being, that balances what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what you love. And those four things are tools that allow you to look inward and get there. They've been well understood in certain cultures. You know, Ikigai is not the only way it's been described, but most people don't know how to apply them directly and think about the use of them directly. And that's where people miss out a little bit on opening up that path towards what I call growth. It's also energy, it's accountability, and being true to themselves through looking inward and what they can achieve by doing that.
Mm-hmm. And how can someone look inward to discover their inner value?
I mean, it's as simple as finding the time and the space. It's not about going on a 4-day retreat in Canada in a cabin with no running water and no electricity. It's a lot simpler than that. It's taking tools like even journaling, right? Which can take you 5 minutes in the evening or whenever the time is right for you, and using that as a tool that allows you to write down where you are. And eventually, once you start to do that significantly, you can find those common themes and get into that vision of what drives you internally. So I'm saying it's what's right for you in terms of the tools that you can use, the time that you have. There's no one size fits all. The other piece of it that's so innately valuable is that you're not going to realize it within 5 minutes. It's going to take you a month to put together a rough idea of where you want to go, but it's going to take 6 months, a year, even longer to get into that next level of understanding. It's unfortunate, you know, it's like digging a foundation. You have to dig down and dig down and dig down before you can build up and build up and build up.
And would you say that success and sacrifice go hand in hand?
Success and sacrifice?
Does one need to make sacrifices to push themselves towards success?
You know, yes and no. I think you do have to sacrifice initially, but sacrifice, once you find that level of success, it pays off in the other direction. It ebbs and flows up and down. It's not going to remain that way all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Squirrels.
And talk to me about failure. What value does it provide? Is it essential? And what is your personal relationship with failure?
Failure is absolutely transformative in terms of my own journey. But the other piece is failure is defined by each individual person, right? You know, a big failure in my eyes for myself could be an inconsequential failure in the eyes of someone who's on the opposite side of the coin. So failure is valuable, but it's about defining your failures. And also, one of the things I am building into this book that I'm releasing later this year is the fact that there's always an allure of darkness behind the clouds. But the sun, rather, there's always an allure of darkness, but the sun is always behind the clouds. And it's all about finding that brightness when you reach those failures and knowing that it's a step to get to another different place in your life and in your career before you just fall down that downward cycle of negativity and failure.
And
Finally, old men move slow sometimes, right?
and kind of going along with that, in a work-first society, what role does balance play in personal growth?
I mean, you've heard so much about the increase in maybe not with the big, large corporations out there, but the balance of wellness that's necessary in the corporate environment. At least the conversation has started there. I know within my own network, some founders of wellness companies that are trying to enter that space. That ultimately shows the priority that needs to be taken in it. And it's going to be something that increases over time in terms of how well understood and well used it is. But it's tough in a workforce. I've worked in those work all the time, nonstop environments in the past. Without those wellness tools being in place in a larger organization, it's tough to find that space. COVID has exacerbated it even more. But, personally, even in the depths of COVID, I remember the first time we got a virtual happy hour on the calendar. And this was supposed to be a team building exercise with 2 young kids at home. 6:00 on a Wednesday night isn't the most cathartic time to be standing on a Zoom meeting, opening a curated set of bottles of wine and tasting it with your teammates. But we were in a learning curve at that point, less than a year into COVID. That felt like it would be the great thing for team building. It didn't play out in that way. So what I'm really trying to say is again, wellness comes down to the individual level. And that's where in my coaching practice, I help my clients find that right balance of wellness again that works for them. It's a personalized, customized sort of a template to get down to understand what's actually going to be the valuable place that's going to help someone's wellness, whether it's a tool. One tool that I've used that helps not necessarily bring just only wellness into the fold. It's this platform of positive intelligence. And positive intelligence works in the realm of trying to identify your self-saboteurs and that negative mindset and enable a positive mindset through a sage way of thinking. That's done through only 15 minutes a day of app-led guidance. And that was transformative for myself and also for clients that I've brought through and used that program. So I bring that as an example because 15 minutes is something pretty much everyone in this world can afford, no matter how busy they are with their work. And it can drive an impact. But again, that's not the right fit for every single person or every single client that I've coached and will coach in the future. Right?
And going along with that, it's rather personalized, but are there habits that really you recommend or that you observe that kind of lead to long-term success growth?
It's definitely finding that balance. I mean, how many large unicorn tech founders out there or other companies that are large, do you see these leaders who they take the time? They know how to either eliminate, they know how to delegate, they know how to automate. And you can right size that no matter what your role is, whether you're an early stage founder or an entrepreneur, you can right size that to fit the way that it's going to be able to enable yourself towards that path to success.
And for you personally, what habits have kind of helped you develop personally or led you to success?
One is highly, highly personal. The thing that drives me on a daily basis is music.
Okay.
And when I sit there and I put a great song on, or have a great artist playing in the background, or the radio hits the right song at the right time, that drives my own wellness forward. But again, it's a highly personal thing. I also, think as someone who's building a business over the last 2 years, tries to support my clients and my communities around me with instant and transparent flexibility and support, it's tough to balance. But having 2 dogs, having 2 young kids, that forces you to prioritize your time differently and know that every email isn't necessarily urgent. Every follow-up on a Slack message is not urgent. And giving myself the grace to step away from that and know that I'm not a heart surgeon, right? No one's going to die on the operating room table if I step away from an email for not even just 2 hours, but 2 days or, longer. That's going to be okay. And people will understand.
Which side of the ear? So
Sure. It's slippery. You can see this is the new Harvest Bridge here.
Oh yeah,
It goes across the river.
very nice. All right. For someone that is lost in a rut or kind of unsure where they want to take their lives, what advice do you give them, and how can they kind of create concrete goals to guide them?
Find someone who supports you. That's the biggest piece of it. It's not something you can do only with the work inside yourself. You need to have an accountability partner, a coach. A coach can help that. That's why I have my coaching practice. That's why I help emerging and established leaders find that path so that I can keep them resilient. And I don't operate as a coach in a way that I'm looking for a 3-month relationship with someone. I'm building these multi-year partnerships where I can be that support person who drives that transformative change over time. That's a prop for coaches. But the other pieces that can come into play, I'm a big fan of a concept of a personal board of advisors. And that's 3, 4, 5 people who are your trusted advisor set that come in, and you can bounce ideas off of them, and they'll keep you honest towards your goals and give you feedback that's highly trustable and allows you to feel confident in that guide. It's not doing it in a silo. Some of it needs to happen in a silo, but for instance, a coach, I go in and I tend to work in a couple different formats, but it's not about setting up an hour every week to talk to someone. It's giving someone the success, or rather the space in between the call to make change and work towards that success path. And whether that's, talking twice a month for 40 minutes or even once a quarter for a 60-minute dedicated block and then 15-minute check-ins when the time fits to stay accountable, it's not a huge time investment. It should be the same with a personal board of advisors or a mentor. I also would caution with mentors. Mentors, I think that there's different value set that can happen with mentors. Sometimes where they're not going deep enough to give that guidance to a level that's actually the right fit for what you need to transform and change. Mentors can be highly, highly valuable. On the flip side, there are potential downfalls with mentors because they don't have the skin in the game.
Nice. And for leaders navigating the time of crisis, maybe they want to change in their job, in a career they've been for 20 years or a field they've been at 20 years, or dealing with uncertainty, how do leaders navigate that based on
I mean, if you're a leader with 20 years of experience, it's not about to flip it into the traditional way of thinking. What would you pull up to put that experience in a model? It's a resume. But a resume is a linear way that you look at your experiences. I'm a bigger fan of the concept of a career sidewalk, actually. And a career sidewalk is not necessarily job to job or role to role, but it's about the different tiles of experience that you've had and how they fill up towards this path of where you want to go next. It's a different way to think about that experience set from a position of 20 years of experience or more, where you maybe have worked in 5 organizations. You've had 3 roles within each organization as you've grown. Those steps of each of those pieces ladder onto each other. So figuring out that story of how they work together helps you land on where you go with that next step in the career sidewalk.
Going along with that, how can someone make a how can they deal with kind of overcoming that fear?
It goes back to that visioning, stems back in a full circle to that visioning and knowing if you're working in the center of that ikigai, that's going to turn you into the right place, no matter which direction it is or where it's going. It's if you're staying true to yourself, that trueness is going to shine through and should give you the confidence to be able to make that. It's a calculated change. Obviously, you have to think about your responsibilities that you have around yourself in making that change. But if you're staying close to that center of your reason for being, that's going to open up those doors and allow you to confidently step into that future mindset. It's also doing that visioning work of putting yourself in those shoes of where you want to be in the future. So, that confidence of using those tools that I've used of optimism and autonomy open up that confidence in the path that you're stepping on, that it's going to take time, but you actually will get there. And I've seen this with some clients that I've worked on coaching with, who have moved from more traditional tech roles into climate junks. When you're talking about senior executives who are in not the end of their career, but approaching more the end of their career than the start of their career, and they've realized they need to get closer to that center in that ikigai, and that gives them the confidence to start to open that path and confidently step into it and make that change for the world that ultimately leads us to a better place.
And in your book, you mentioned challenging traditional thinking and how autonomy can lead to personal growth and success. Why is it important to challenge traditional thinking, and how can one do it?
I mean, hasn't human history been driven by challenging traditional thinking? But traditional ways of thinking are the comfortable way to do things, and it's about being uncomfortable more than anything else, really. If you make yourself uncomfortable, that's where you find that center of what really drives you, which is really important.
How can one do that? Would it be through experimentation, for vision work? What would that be?
It's a combination. It's vision work, whether it's vision of your goals right now, your vision of where you are in the future. But it's easier now more than ever to road test an idea. I have a friend who I've, had for a long time, who had this idea, and this is kind of a strange one. You hear about big and tall men's clothing. There's no clothing built for unusually short individuals. He had an idea to start a brand of, jeez, a brand of short men's clothing. And I just bring this up as an example because it's still an idea that he's finding the way to build it. But he built, through one of the many digital tools, whether it was Canva or some other design tool, mock-ups for ads. He spent $200 on digital ads on Facebook with option A, option B, just to see how it resonated with his potential customer. And that built his proof point that there is a business to build around that. That's an idea that probably seems off the wall, but it's ultimately a simple idea. And he could road test the ability of it to actually resonate with his potential customer. It's a fantastic example of how you can take almost any idea and understand if there's an audience out there for it.
And then, why do so many people find it hard to be autonomous, kind of go against the status quo?
I mean, we're all people humans are built as people who value community, and going with the status quo, that's what people tend to fall into initially. Is it's easier to go in the direction everyone else is going versus against the headwinds or against the we should be all right. Resistance of going in the opposite direction. And it's not about completely destroying everything going the other direction. It's about understanding that the tougher path to go has an opportunity to drive innovation and drive growth. It's a valuable endeavor to engage in.
And what is someone's full potential, and does it first live up to it?
I mean, the full, come on, Winter. The full potential is dictated by what your own capabilities is. How many of some of the greatest businesses in the world in the recent years have been driven by people who haven't gone down traditional paths? They haven't gone to Harvard Business School. They haven't gone to Stanford. They're people with simple ideas, and they just had I'm not going to say it's lack of awareness or concern or lack of worry about what other people think, but they had the simple ideas that they stayed resilient over time on. That's going to drive your propensity to success. It's going to increase your luck raiser, the potential for those ideas to land in a category of luck and moving in the right way. That's what those people have done.
Going back to your book, Make Your Own Glass Half Full, what's one message that you can share that you think can change someone's life?
It's an ability to see that you could actually, instead of being in the ubiquitous classifications of either being a glass half full or a glass half empty person, it's realizing that through those tools, you can make your own glass half full. It's a simple concept that shifts that traditional way of thinking, because most people are resolved to either thinking they're glass half empty or glass half full, when in reality, if you use those tools, you can drive a different path to success, no matter which direction you want to head down next.
What was that process like for you, discovering that you could make your own glass, fill it up?
It's the non-linear corporate career that I followed for 20 years, working across everywhere from enterprise scale organizations to startups. It was always pivoting from one place to another that was a little bit different, and ultimately finding success in making those changes. More acutely within that corporate journey was getting laid off twice in my career. And understanding, that I could go and pull up my own bootstraps and build something coming out of that. And knowing that it's not, it's the book that that I've written. So to use a book analogy that's related, it's not the end of the book. It's moving to the next chapter, and knowing that all of those experiences in that career sidewalk that came before opened up an opportunity that's going to come into the future. And digging into that visioning work, staying true to myself, opened up that path towards each subsequent step moving forward. Even though I didn't totally change the game across those 20 years with each subsequent role, it led towards the next opportunity and the next opportunity and the next opportunity by following those connections, that using that optimism and that autonomy, knowing that it's all going to work out. And maybe there's some lack of it's not an intelligence thing. It's just a confidence in the fact that it can work. And I'm driven by, obviously, I'm a white male. There's a lot of privilege that comes with that in this world that we live in. But through my coaching and through my platform of Make Your Own Glass Half Full, it's about saying no matter your background or experience, if you come in with a confident path of thinking towards that success and use optimism and autonomy, you can actually achieve anything that you want to that's in front of you. Optimism is a funny thing because you hear people say that you're overly optimistic, right? Or you're not balanced with enough. It's not pessimism, but it's the reality of the situation. But it's always looking and saying that even again, when the clouds, when it's a dark day and you can't see the sun, that the sun is still behind those clouds. That optimism to know that sun is going to reveal itself when the time is right. It's not going to be, you can't control it, but it's going to come back at some point in time. It's just that belief structure of using that builds that optimism within yourself. And for leaders, it's about inspiring your team to employ that same thought of optimism. As a leader, that drips down to your employees that you manage. There's an ability, if you're employing an optimistic perspective, your employees are going to feel that and start to pick up on that. And in my own experience, one really powerful example of that was, although I was ultimately laid off from Microsoft due to a team reorganization, working under a leader like Satya Nadella in a hundreds of thousands of person scale organization and seeing how that optimistic perspective and that needle in a haystack, that proved to me that perspective can work. And it showed how with a leader that employs that mindset and that way of thinking, it can inspire a huge number of individuals to hold that same perspective and value that in not only personal success, but building business success.
And when you're coaching leaders and maybe someone's more inherently pessimistic or doesn't have that mindset, how can you kind of build that mindset? How can you get someone to believe that the sun is behind the clouds?
It's a challenge, but I'm inspired by that. And that's why I have this coaching practice. It's why I wrote the book. It's a one-on-one unique situation to go through, but it's about understanding how to open up the conversation stream with someone who has that closed, traditional, pessimistic way of thinking. And it's, as a coach, it's, let's equate it to, being Michelangelo, right? And building a statue out of a pure block of marble. That doesn't take one strike of a chisel. It takes small chisel after small chisel after small chisel. That's how you help those leaders. And that's how I help those leaders find that optimism. But you have to find the pathway towards that optimism by chiseling away and getting to that beautiful, beautiful place. And then you see how that optimism starts to flow. And when you get a drip, drip, drip of it, that drip, drip, drip is self-perpetuating. And eventually it opens up the floodgates towards an optimistic perspective. I've also, through my own experience in my coaching, one piece of how you cultivate it in your teams, you see the result of that, is through being transparent and honest with the teams that you work with. There's yes, as a leader, you're not going to open up your books 100% to every person within the organization. But if you share more widely in a transparent manner, that's going to help your employees feel valued, understood, or even in a startup situation, as a solo entrepreneur or a founder, that's going to help bring your first customers into the fold because you're being transparent and understanding that you're going to get feedback through that experience. That's another example of the traditional pessimistic way of thinking, though. So many traditionally startup founders, they have blinders on. And if I can help open up those blinders and take those blinders off, then it's not necessarily taking those blinders off of their eyes. It's using my perspective and my consultative way of thinking to help open their mindset.
So you mentioned building that optimism. It's kind of a long process with lots of small steps.
It can be a long process. It's not always a long process, but it can be a long process.
Kind of chiseling away at that marble block. With autonomy, is that process similar, or does someone just kind of wake up one day and decide today's the day I'm going to make the big leap and take the risk? Or what does the process look like of helping leaders or helping individuals build that autonomy?
Yeah. Autonomy is a different animal than optimism. It's not being open, because a lot of, especially when you talk about entrepreneurs or leaders, they've found that autonomy. It's changing the background of that autonomy more than it is about opening the autonomy. And also knowing that the autonomy is more of a personal autonomy than about an organizational autonomy that you might be in, or a leadership autonomy space. It's as a leader, you've built that autonomy over your career up to that point. But this is more around reframing that autonomy towards your own personal level of success versus the autonomy either in an organization or in a mindset of being about the broader situation. It's your personal autonomy that helps being driven there.
What was there, and if so, what was the aha moment for you that led you to become a growth or an energy coach and an author?
It took a long time. It was actually being in a few communities of other entrepreneurial minded people and just having them start to understand who I was. And that opened up a confident way of believing that I actually can do this. And I have something substantive here. It goes back to that board of advisors idea, right? You can pressure test these ideas and know that there's some value in that way of thinking. And, I'm a pleaser. That's my biggest self-saboteur. I give, and I don't ask. So I've had to work on that a little bit in building this business, but I knew I was able to identify that's what I needed to work on. And now I'm 2 years into having this coaching business. I've written this book that's going to be coming out later this year. it all stems from my unique set of experiences, and every human in this world has a unique set of experiences that they could dive back into in building anything that's in their center of their ikigai, their imagination. There's a path there. And also, I do this with my coaching clients. It's knowing that, you might fail. And you might fail. Anything can happen. The world can change in a heartbeat at the same set of time. If you don't do it now, you're going to regret it later on. If you've centered into that center and you know where you want to go, you're going to regret that more than you are when you find out whatever failure might actually incur. Because the failure that you imagine isn't going to be is going to be greater and bigger than the failure of the reality. If you do fail, you'll lose the regret, and the failure will help get you to a different place. Also, how many people have you known that have built something that failed, but they came out more resilient through it? And eventually, over time, they manage to use that to lead to the next idea of what they can, what they could do, what they could build, what they could implement, or where they could go.
And for people that purchase your book and read your book, what do you hope that they come away with in terms of taking action? What actions do you hope they take?
I hope, especially with the younger, more wide generation coming up, that with their mission and value-based ideas, that they're confident and able to make a change in the world that actually leads towards tipping points that help us save this world and make it a more just, equitable place, especially with areas around climate change and climate ideas. It's about making sure that those ideas have a test bed of confidence that they can sit in so that they can come from an imaginative standpoint into a reality, and make sure that we have a better world than we all came into this world with.
Absolutely. And have you noticed in leaders that you coach, those that succeed and achieve their goals, how does it impact their lives?
One example that I love to bring up, it's not someone I've had the chance of coaching, but David Smith, who is the founder of Cotopaxi, stepped into this realm of building that business with the idea of improving the world. That's a proof point for anyone with a mission and value-based idea that they can make an impact on the world. I talk about David Smith in the book. He's one of the most inspirational people who steps in and doesn't only, again, is a great example, doesn't only build a clothing brand that's a B certified corporation, but they step in when they first launch with the most significant amount of venture capital put behind that kind of an organization. It's a proof point to leverage that if you're doing things right for the world, ultimately you can come back and lead towards business success, financial success, but align with those mission and those value-based ideas that you start with.
When have you been happiest in your career, and what makes you proudest?
What makes me, I'll start with the backside of that. What makes me proudest is seeing with the teams that I managed even early in my career, it's seeing where they are now. It's understanding that those people are doing things that are bigger and more transformative in the world than where they started from when I was working with them, say, in a digital marketing agency. That's what drives me on that confident path that I'm moving in the right direction, and what also makes me feel satisfied. I've been happier in my career. I've worked across great organizations with great support. I've worked at startups that are exciting. I'm honestly happiest at any point in time when I've got a collaborative group of people around me. And whether it's coaching clients or whether it's with these communities I have around me now, or even going back to any of the corporate positions that I held in the marketing portion of my career, it was always about the team around me. That fact that we're all in this together, that's when I've always been happiest. And I continue to be happiest now because I have great coaching clients. I've got a great support system around writing the book. And I have fantastic communities of people, both locally as well as across the world, that I can rely upon for that great collaborative support and walk away from each day feeling like I'm working towards these changes that are ultimately going to bring us to tipping points, either an economic or societal standpoint, that bring us in a better direction for justice and equity. And again, stepping out of this world in a better place than we stepped into it with.
From your experience in coaching and personally, do values change? If you build a vision plan around values and they change, how do you navigate that change?
Yeah, I think they do. They don't change outright, but they change flavor, or they evolve over time. My values, going back to the early part of my career, I always wanted to make the world a better place. I didn't know I could do it. I still want to make the world a better place. Now I know that I can do it. The values stayed the same. I've seen it even with leaders who step from one industry or one way of working into a different place. Even if they go from having no idea of what's in that reason for being to finding out what that is, ultimately, a lot of where they've been comes into building that value set in that space. So it remains consistent, but whether it's the aperture widens or it's the color of changes to an extent, that's what it is. Or you open up an ability to zero in more on what the center of each value is, and you work closer towards the center of the value versus just touching it on the outside.
Really good answer. I think with that,
All right.
I'll wrap it up.
Cool.
And that was really good.